Is love enough? This is the question I was left with after being in Charlottesville last Saturday. I have always believed there is good in everyone. The first principle of my faith, Unitarian Universalism, claims that there is inherent worth and dignity in all persons. But as I watched the white supremacist demonstrators with their Nazi flags and their clubs and their shields, it was really hard to tell myself in that moment that there was good somewhere within these people. These are people who came across the country in support of the hateful idea that people who were not straight, white, and able-bodied men, these people deserve to be oppressed in the eyes of these supremacists. How am I supposed to find something to love in that? How am I to live in this world after witnessing what I saw in Charlottesville? I went to Charlottesville with a group from the First Unitarian Universalist Church of Virginia, which is my home congregation. About 20 of us all went up there to witness from our church. We all arrived in different times and in different cars, and we all ended up in different places throughout the city. Some stayed at the First Methodist Church of Charlottesville in order to be in solidarity with other religious leaders who were lending aid to protesters. Those of you who weren't there were a ton of religious leaders who were standing in solidarity with the protesters, across denominations. Some of us went to the massive counter-protest that was around Emancipation Park, and others in my congregation were just scattered about the vicinity. For those who had stayed at the Methodist Church, we saw counter-protesters who had been bloodied in fights with the white supremacists, who were in dire need of first aid, whether it was from head wounds, from the tear gas, or from the pepper spray. Those of us who were in the crowd around Emancipation Park, we saw fights erupt, skirmishes every 10, 15 minutes. And those of us who were close enough could feel the pepper spray and the smoke start to affect us from the tear gas. A few of my congregants from my Richmond church were on that street when the terrorist attack, when the car hit. One of the members of my congregation was a doctor and immediately started chest compressions and CPR, made sure the spine was straight on one of the victims who did survive. She stayed with her. She lied to the emergency crew that was there, telling them that she was her cousin because this woman's husband was not with her and she was alone. And she did not want to leave her alone. And we all came back to Richmond Saturday night, shaken by what we had seen. And so the next day we did what any good group of people would do. We went to church. We all gathered together to talk and to check in with how our souls were doing after such painful witness. And we mourned. We spoke about how fearful we were that such a hateful crowd could exist. We cried together, each of us feeling helpless in the face of such evil. And for an hour, we shared our stories and our feelings, and we solved absolutely nothing. The time in mourning is not time wasted. We needed that time to share what had happened. And there is great power in lamentation. To take the time to recognize the hurt that we were feeling after that tragedy and to be able to name it, to give it voice. It's a process that to some feels counterintuitive, wondering what comes of mourning. But it is the first and most important step in any healing, to identify the pain and to name it as real. So let us take a moment to mourn. We mourn the loss of life from that Saturday, of Heather Hare, of Jay Cullen, of Bert Bates. We mourn for those who were injured in the name of justice, who still bear the physical wounds of hatred. We mourn for those whose faith has been shaken, who witnessed the depth of hatred that humanity is capable of for the very first time. And we mourn for those who have been oppressed for centuries, who only know too well this hatred, who have indeed seen the worst of humanity since they first arrived on this planet. They are the ones we are called to lift up, to struggle with. We are the ones called to abolish the systems of oppression that they have known all their lives. And we mourn that those systems are still in place. But we only get to mourn for so long. There is still a lot of work to do. There's a lot of healing that is yet to be done. I visited Charlottesville this last Thursday. I have a colleague from seminary who just recently moved to Charlottesville, who is a chaplain up there. She was there on Saturday, and she's one of the few people I did not see Saturday, who was a friend of mine. But we needed to get together for lunch. First of all, we hadn't seen each other in a year, and we needed to mourn, and we needed to process. When I got into Charlottesville, I could feel that there was a sense of shock and stillness still in the city. There was wounding all around, but underneath it was the faintest wind of hope and strength within the citizens of that city. They would be damned if a group of neo-Nazis was going to continue to have power in that city after Saturday. So my friend and I, after lunch, we walked down to 4th and Water Street, which is the site of the terrorist attack. The entire street had been blocked off on both sides. There were messages strewn in chalk, all on the sidewalk, all on the road, all on the walls. Someone had taped a copy on the road of "This land is your land," circled it with a heart. The old Woody Guthrie song. And while I loved that sentiment, the power in song, I'm still not sure I want to share this land with white nationalists. I don't think this is their land. But there were flowers that looked to explode from the spot where Heather had died. There was a photo of her. It was all very powerful. But the most powerful thing was a message that someone had written in chalk very plainly. Rest in power. Not rest in peace. That, for me, was the most healing thing I had seen all week. Just like her mother had done at the memorial service, someone had claimed power in the face of tragedy and wanted it to move us forward, to continue to fight for the very same things Heather was fighting for when she died. Healing comes from hope. Healing comes when we believe there is something better in the future. There are countless anecdotes that I've heard doctors talk about of patients who believed that they could survive, who miraculously beat odds over a fatal disease. Having something to look forward to because they had hope. So for us to heal, we need to believe there is still a possibility for good to triumph over hate. How many of you heard about the free speech rally in Boston yesterday? Free speech. By free speech, I mean white nationalists who believe that their hate speech comes without cost. According to reports that I saw, there were about a couple dozen of these free speech white nationalists who had shown up at this gazebo in order to rally. And do you know how many protesters they were met with? Over 15,000. I put the odds of love to hate at 500 to 1 in that crowd. Yeah! I call that a triumph. Reports say that there were a few rocks thrown by counter-protesters. Some people got a little violent. And a few dozen of the counter-protesters were taken into custody. So less than 30 out of 15,000. The vast majority were peaceful. This demonstration was an attempt to show the power of love over hatred. But again, is love enough? So there's a Unitarian minister from way back in the 50s, a theologian called James Luther Adams. Is anyone familiar with James Luther Adams? That's all right. We're going to go just real quick. He has an essay called The Guiding Principles of a Free Faith. And one of the things he says in this essay is, the creation of justice in community requires the organization of power. Through the organization of power, liberated persons tie into history. Otherwise, they cannot achieve freedom in history. Injustice in community is a form of power. It's an abuse of power. And justice is an exercise of just and lawful institutional power. For love to be of any use, for love to become justice, it has to be empowered by community. What happened Saturday is an excellent example of what the power of an organized community can do. Thousands agreed to meet in Boston and simply be present in the face of oppression. And while their presence did certainly not end racism, it sent the message: hate speech is not welcome. It diminished those voices of oppression and strengthened the voice of justice. As Cornel West has said, justice is what love looks like in public. For love to truly be effective, it must be taken up by the public, and it must be taken out into the public. We need to be activists. I'm going to talk a little bit about the Bible study this morning. We talked about a boat. We talked about how the old cathedrals have that inverse boat in the ceiling. And I love that image because we talked about calm in the storm and needing a place to rest and needing a place to mourn and to heal. And that is what the boat can be. But a boat is no good if it stays in a dock. That boat must move forward. It is my belief that for love to become justice, we need to move the boat along. Sometimes we need to go out into choppy waters. Good thing we have such a solid crew. So, in the book of Isaiah, there is actually talk about activism. I'm going to read this passage from you. It's from the lectionary for today, but I'm going to change it a little bit. The Universalist theology says that God is love. So, we're going to do a little word exercise. Every time God or Lord is mentioned in this passage, I'm going to change that to the word love. Thus says love, maintain justice, do what is right, for soon my salvation will come and my deliverance is revealed. And the foreigners who join themselves to love, to minister to love for the sake of love, and to be love's servants. All who keep the Sabbath and do not profane it, and hold fast to the covenant of love, these I will bring to my holy mountain and make them joyful in the house of prayer. Their burnt offerings and their sacrifices will be accepted on my altar, for my house shall be called a house of prayer for all people. Thus, love gathers the outcasts of Israel, and love will gather others to them besides those already gathered. Maintain justice and do what is right. This section of Isaiah is talking about those who have fallen away from the covenant of God, being welcomed back by the children of Israel for doing what is right. This is a verse that says it is your actions that are important, not your affiliations. It is the work of justice that is tantamount to all. That is doing the work of God. That is bringing heaven on earth. That is why so many showed up in Charlottesville in the face of evil. Justice work. Showing up for what you believe. That's writing letters to the editor when you see injustice. That's calling out to representatives in office. It's speaking up when you witness injustice. And if you are not one who can speak, you cannot speak before thousands or sing like angels. It is the job of justice to stand with those who do. Justice work is putting a faith of love into action. Despite what we have been told by the Beatles, love is not all you need. It is not enough. By itself, love is just a sentiment that sits inside you. But love is a great place to start. It is a great source of energy, and it needs to be harnessed in order to create goodness and justice. And when love is multiplied and well organized, it can change the course of history and set right the wrongs of 1,000 years. This is our calling in this world. And it starts with love.